It is no secret that there has been this amazing surge, this resurgence of interest with adults and music lessons, especially since the pandemic hit. Everybody is looking for something to keep them occupied and to keep them learning. In fact, my dad started taking piano lessons for the first time this year in January. He has four girls who grew up on the piano, and he was feeling a little bit left out. So he is digging into piano. He's practicing every single day. And so I thought, hey, I know someone that can talk about this. I have brought a special guest in today. Doug Hanvey is going to be here with us, and he's going to chat about the business of teaching recreational adult piano students. And I think it's just such a timely topic because there are so many people out there looking for new things to do. And yeah, I know things are kind of opening up a little bit now, and there might be this little like tinge in the back of your brain that's saying, oh, but this is all going to disappear. And I'm going to tell you what, I don't think that's the case. I think this resurgence that we've seen is going to continue. So today what we're going to do is we're going to dig into three really important things that you need to know about teaching recreational adults so that you can expand your studio in new and amazing ways. So I am going to welcome Doug Hanvey. He is the owner of the Portland Piano Lab, and let's bring him on screen here today in just 1 second. But first, I want to remind you all that we love to learn out loud here today. So if you hear something that is valuable to you, give us a hashtag takeaway and let us know what that valuable thing is. Set that intention out in the universe so that you know that you're going to take action on something. And don't forget that we have the Savvy Sara bot set up. If, the word is wrong, and we can fix that real quick here. The word of the day is adults. So if you give us an adults below the Savvy Sara bot, we'll set you up with the links that we're going to be mentioning today, and you definitely want to get a hold of those. All right, so let's get to it. I see Elizabeth is here from Central New York. Good morning, Raphael. Hey there, Lisa. Raphael's tuning in from Brazil. Nice to see you. Really excellent. All right, so I'm going to bring on our guest here in 1 second, and I would love to welcome Doug Hanvey. Hello.
Hi, Sarah.
Thank you so
Nice
much
to
for
see you.
joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
You know, you and I have been in contact for quite some time. I'm going to say probably around 5 years. Does that sound right to you?
That's probably true. Yeah.
Yeah, Doug has written several really fabulous blog articles, both for sarasmusicstudio.com, the old website, and then also on Savvy Music Studios. So you can definitely check out some of those blog posts. You are such you have so much good information to share, not just about teaching, but also in the business side of things.
Thank you.
Yeah. So today we're going to be chatting about teaching recreational adults, and this is a topic that you're really passionate about. Tell us a little bit about your studio and how you got into teaching recreational adults.
Yeah. Well, when I first started teaching piano, which was in the early 90s, I was mentored by my teacher at the time, who was a jazz teacher, actually. I was living in Los Angeles, and I don't know why, but it just so happened as I started to advertise my teaching, and maybe because he was well known for his book and everything, that I got mostly adults and mostly young adults at that time, and I was one too. And really, really enjoyed teaching adults. So I was doing that from my first time teaching piano. Um, Maybe a few years later, I started to explore, teaching kids, and I did teach some kids and teenagers for a while. Um, but I think it's just my own kind of orientation towards music and towards piano and towards communication, and also that I'm not like one of those teachers that really I'm not terribly interested in behavioral control during lessons. I'm not terribly interested in having to pressure or motivate students to practice. Um, I actually experienced that to some extent as a child, actually to more than some extent, and I didn't really want to fall into that position of being that kind of teacher.
Yeah.
I love kids, but I realized that I actually really enjoyed teaching adults more. And then I started developing my own curriculum for teaching adults because I'm a pretty creative guy, and it kept me interested in teaching. And I've also found that developing my own curriculum helps me to stay on top of things. Um, and you know, I've discovered over the years that the more I teach something, any particular subject, the more I learn about it, the better I get at it. It's like teaching something um, requires me to know it at a deeper level. So currently, as an example, I have several adult students who are now working their way through a college music theory textbook, actually in harmony.
Oh,
And so I'm revisiting that topic and getting deeper into that again. So and then actually, gosh, it's been like 15 years. I went back to school and got a graduate degree in adult education. So I have a master's degree in adult education. I can't tell you how. I can't say that it was super valuable. That the master's program itself really taught me too much that I didn't already kind of intuitively know. But I do have that degree. So
well,
yeah.
it's always nice to have the fancy letters, right?
I suppose, yeah.
Well, it's so I'm so excited to chat about this topic because I think that there are many teachers who are here with us today who are interested in teaching adults, and maybe like they've taught a couple but they don't know how to market to them, or they've found that it was just such a different animal than teaching kids. But yet I hear in piano forums and just music forums in general all the time that there's this really great interest in being able to expand into teaching adults because it gives us the opportunity to kind of shift our schedules a little bit. Because
Mm.
especially with retired adults, like being able to offer things during the daytime hours, and so it's really, it's a hot topic, and a lot of people are interested in it.
Yeah, actually, I think because of the pandemic, I actually don't have any. I mean, 92% maybe of my students right now are adults, and I have like 4 or 5 teenagers. I don't really teach under age 13, and I require that all my teenage students be self motivated.
Mm.
That they want to be in lessons. Um, so what I've discovered during the pandemic is even though I'm teaching working adults, um, everyone, not everyone, but so many people are working from home now, and can make their own schedules, make their own work schedules. And I have students starting at 7:45 in the morning. I have students that come all through the morning and the early afternoon.
Oh, wow.
So whereas before the pandemic, the evening hours were very popular,
Mm.
and sometimes it was harder for me to fill those morning spots, but that's not the case anymore, and I'm hoping that that's going to continue.
Yeah, what a great way to like shift the way you work, and really to be in control of creating an ideal schedule, one that really supports you as a business owner.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm a morning person too, so that's
Well,
good for
that
me.
helps. That helps for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to mention, I want to reach out to the audience members. Thank you, Lisa and Janet, for helping me with the sound levels. I think I've got those adjusted here now. And I also want to mention, for those of you who are joining us right now, if you have a teacher friend who has shown interest in teaching adults, or if you know that this has been a hot topic in one of the Facebook groups that you're a part of, I invite you to let them know about this broadcast now. If you want to grab the link and send it on over to them, we'd love to have them be a part of this conversation. I also realized I did not introduce myself today. If there's anybody who's new here, hi. My name is Sara Campbell. I am a business strategist, mindset, and marketing coach for music studio owners and online education experts. And we go live here every Wednesday. So this today just happens to be special because Doug is joining us, which is just so incredibly fabulous. So I'm really glad that you're here. So let's get to some questions, shall we? We've got some good
Sure.
questions. And I want to also say, hey, if we have anybody here, if you are a teacher of adult students, let us know. Or if you are interested in teaching adults, but you haven't quite dabbled into that yet, let us know that below. And thank you, Tyler. I think I just fixed that volume level. Let me know if that's better. Okay, let's get to the topic. So let's unpack this a bit. What exactly is recreational music making?
It's interesting that that question is interesting to me because, I've been essentially teaching that for most of my teaching career. And I've never thought of it that way. I know that my understanding is that Brenda Dillon and I think Brian Chung came up with that or kind of developed that concept of recreational music making maybe 15, 20 years ago. Um, and it's a useful concept, especially if one thinks of music lessons as non-recreational. It's like a way of distinguishing. Um,
Okay.
but it's kind of it's a little bizarre to me actually because I think that for much of the history, look at the last 200 years, in the late 19th century, the piano was the most popular instrument in the world. Well, it's still probably the most popular instrument, but I mean every home had one, and I'm sure most children took piano lessons, and I imagine most of them. I mean, there was probably nothing in the way of professional music schools and careers the way there are today, and so almost everybody, I would say, was already a recreational player. So it's just a little odd to me that I feel like we're kind of coming back to what's obvious, which is that, of course, everyone should have the opportunity to play music and to learn music, and if they want to do it recreationally for fun and enjoyment, great. Who's to say that they should be pressured to go into some professional direction and have to do all the adjudications and all that so many
Yeah.
teachers say to do? There's nothing wrong with that, but then especially for adults. So obviously your average adult student is going to be a recreational player. So if you think in terms of adult students, it's kind of redundant to say a recreational adult student. Um,
True,
yeah.
true. That makes sense.
There are some, of course, younger in particular, and I have taught some younger students who have professional or semi-professional aspirations as musicians. Like I actually have a young adult student. He hasn't been playing for more than a few years, and he just got an offer to start teaching. And last lesson he was asking me all sorts of business-related questions. So he's kind of has semi-professional aspirations in music. But most of my students are recreational students by definition. Which is not to say that they don't take their lessons very seriously. Many of them
Yeah.
do.
Oh,
So,
I agree. I mean, I would consider, I know I mentioned at the top of the broadcast that my dad is now taking piano lessons and
yeah.
he's taking it very seriously. He's practicing an hour a day and
Well, he has to. I mean, or he'd be in trouble with you.
right? He's actually getting lessons from my the youngest of the daughters. There's four of us and she's
Oh
teaching
wow.
him. So we've been it's been really fun to see the video. He'll take videos of himself, playing things and sending it out to us. And he's really right now he's focused on learning some Beatles. Like he loves the
Oh
Beatles.
well.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I see some great comments here from the people who are teaching adults. We have Bethany has two adult students. She has one who's 80 years old, which
Mm.
is amazing. That's fantastic. And Elizabeth is hoping to expand some offerings for adults. Carrie's been teaching adults, and they've always been a part of her studio. And Lisa, yeah, I think that sometimes work, balancing the time that it takes to do things can be tricky. But congratulations on gaining that 20-year-old student. That's exciting. So now that we've kind of defined what recreational music is, and doing so, kind of looking at, well, what is it not, right? Thinking
Mm.
about that, I would love to know what do you think are the most challenging aspects of teaching adults?
Uh, that's interesting that you asked that question because I've been actually conducting a series of interviews with teachers who teach adults, and that's exactly one of my questions. And I haven't had to answer it yet. So gosh, now I'm at the other end of it. One of the biggest challenges of teaching adults. I mean, Hmm.
You're an expert at it, so maybe you don't have as many challenges.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I'm a little bit at my wit's end to come up with an interesting answer to that. I mean, certainly it depends on the student. You know, every student has their own challenges. I mean, um, maybe, you know, for your average teacher, not so much for me because I'm pretty easygoing and patient. Although sometimes I do get a little annoyed when, even when an adult student, you know, just kind of slacks for too long.
Yeah.
But I would imagine one of the biggest challenges for your average teacher, and because as a teacher is, you know, one of the greatest satisfactions of teaching, at least in my experience, is to see your students grow and develop and learn. And, you know, if it goes on too many weeks or months, and I have occasionally, very rarely, but I have occasionally fired adult students, fired them,
Yeah.
you know, for whatever reason. But I would say the biggest challenge for many teachers who maybe don't have experience teaching adults and are going to start is dealing with the fact that adults are very busy and they will have weeks where they didn't get much practice in and not much progress was made on what they were supposed to be working on from
Yeah.
last week. And I don't know, as an adult, as someone who's also very busy, I just, you know, I'm not, I don't treat them as children. I don't have those high expectations. I do have high expectations generally, but week to week, you can't really, for recreational students, have those kinds of expectations. Um, so I have found ways around that actually, in a way, keep lessons more interesting for me. So, for example, I had a student a few days ago she was away a few days and then had a very busy week at work and told me she was, you know, one thing about being kind of easygoing that way is your students will tend to be honest with you, and my students kind of intuitively know, like, you know, that they can tell me I had a bad week, I didn't get a lot of practice in, I'm not going to
Mm,
like yell at them.
yeah.
And so she told me, you know, bad week, didn't get much practice. And so I often will suggest, well, let's do something, let's explore something that we don't usually have time for.
Mm,
And so she's been doing some theory. And so I said, well, let's just spend some time taking the next step in what you've been learning about chords. And so I screen shared her some information about how to, it was about actually how to analyze chords and figure out the root and the quality and all that, the inversion. And she got really absorbed into it, and we spent the lesson doing that. So you know, it was fine. It worked fine.
I like the way that you frame this, especially saying that in teaching recreational adults, one of the things that we have to caution ourselves in is not to set expectations super high for the weekly progress, because not only is that going to potentially set them up for, like, quote unquote failure, right? Because they might not have time to get to it, or they might struggle with something, but it also allows us to, like, keep that nice vibe in our
Mhm, mhm.
lessons, right? To make it fun and
Yeah,
to keep them coming back. And
exactly.
I would say probably for me, one of the most challenging things for some recreational adults is that they themselves set the expectations so high. And I think as being adults, we think that, okay, I'm older, so it should be easier for me to make faster progress, where we know that's not really the case, especially with music, because it's such a unique skill to learn. And in fact, as adults, sometimes it takes longer to absorb
Mhm,
things and to get the hang of things. So that's
mhm.
been my challenge personally, is making sure that we both, that we have that good conversation about setting expectations and knowing what success looks like when we're an adult student.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I see some great comments here from some of our teachers. Yeah, that, like what Pete says here, like encouraging not to get frustrated when we have a valley in progress. I think that's a good way to put that, Pete. I'm glad to hear. I'm glad to see you here, by the way, friend. Glad to see you here. Um, yeah, and Laura says the same. Like, I find that my adults want to understand it all right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course there's always the other little tricky parts of like them taking vacations, like work getting in the way, like Rachel and Linda are sharing. Yeah, so there are some trickier parts about teaching adults for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and just an aside to that about policies. So, I know that generally the professional recommendation is to have a strong student policy, and I highly recommend that. What I do is, I make it very clear from the upfront with students that, students that have very busy or uneven work schedules or
Yeah.
travel for work a lot, I make it clear, like, you know, you're going to be expected to pay for your lessons even if you have to travel for work. So yeah, I may not be the best teacher for you if you're one of those students.
Right, right. Yeah, setting the expectations from day one is so crucial. So
Yeah.
you have 3 points that we're going to go through today, and so we've set the stage for these, I believe. And let's bring up the first tip in being a successful teacher of recreational adults. So talking about understanding the adult student mindset, and I kind of think that we've danced around this topic a little bit, but tell us more about this.
Well, um, so there are some basic principles of adult education, one of which is that adults like to be more self-directed in their learning.
Hmm.
That's one of the major differences between your average adult learner and child learner. Um, Adults have that extensive background as learners, and they also want to feel that what they are working on is relevant to their goals,
Yeah.
and understandably. Um, Whereas with kids, we all have had the experience, if you've taught kids, of you just tell them what to do, and they hopefully generally will do that. Um, so self direction is one of those core principles of how most adults are, and so I kind of orient my own. I'm a very organized teacher, and I'm structured, and I account for the fact that students have their own unique goals and maybe timelines of when they want to hopefully achieve those goals. Um, but they're also coming to me and paying me because of my experience as a musician, as a teacher, knowing in order to get to your goal, you really need to learn this and this and this.
Hmm.
Um, so, in addition to just working directly on their goal, I'm going to provide them that structure and support and say, well, let's do some, let's learn your pennant scales, let's learn your major scales, just some of those fundamentals that they might not otherwise, be drawn to or be interested in. Um, but then, from the beginning, so like even before the first lesson, I ask students to fill out a questionnaire, and
Ah.
that's something I would recommend for any teacher of adults. I have a very, a lot of questions. What are your goals? What kinds of styles of music do you like and want to play and listen to? Um, you know, those kinds of questions, specific pieces you want to play, timelines when you think this might be achieved, your interest in music theory, your interest in creativity, like improvising, things like that. So I can have a big picture overview of where they're at and where they've been, if they've studied before, and where they want to go, and then help them move towards their unique goals in a self-directed way with my support. Kind of, in a way, I see myself more as a facilitator than as a teacher of adults.
I like the way that you're framing that. I do think that those interview questions are really great. I'm glad that you shared those with us. And I'd love to know from our teachers watching, have you put that into practice in your studio? Do you have an intake form before people get there that really help you get that big picture, like Doug said, get the big picture so that you, as the facilitator, can put together kind of a map that, okay, if this is where you want to go, here are some of the places that we're going to visit along the way.
Yeah.
I like that. um Oh, that's Maggie. Maggie's asking, the questionnaire sounds like a great idea. Would you be able to share your interview questionnaire, please? Maybe we can have that be part of the blog post that will be happening after this. Yeah. So understanding the adult mindset, like what is the the key part of that? Like if even if some people are like, well, what do you mean by the word mindset? What are we trying to really understand about that adult mindset?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, I mean, one big aspect of that is what we were talking about before, is that, you're on average, your adult learner is not coming um, to, to study with a professional goal in mind.
Yeah.
Um, and so kind of relaxing a bit your expectations of that. They may be interested in recitals, they may not be.
Yeah.
Um, uh, they may be interested in doing something like adjudications, but probably not, or less likely. Um, so, just a little bit of a more recreational attitude as a teacher, in that way.
Yeah. Part of it is getting our mindset in place, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that's a big part of it, right?
yeah, getting knowing that okay, this is a different animal, and that you need to respect, that their desires and their goals are going to be quite different, and we need to take time to really understand this. I see some takeaway. Elizabeth says her takeaway is to revamp her intake questions and work on self-directed learners. I like that. Yeah, very good. Um,
Cool.
this so we the first step is to really understand the adult student mindset, and once we can do that, then we get into like, okay, what am I going to teach these people? So
Mm.
your next point is to focus more on theory and creativity. Can you tell us more about how you do that?
Yeah. Well, long when I kind of started teaching a few years, I guess, after I started teaching, when I kind of went off on my own and was no longer working with my original teacher who mentored me in the first place, I started developing my own materials, um, and I have recognized and as a teacher, but I've also recognized that most adults appreciate this, that that there are some fundamental areas of musicianship that all support each other. Um, so reading skills, ear skills, keyboard technique,
Mm-hmm.
uh, rhythm skills, and then one that I think teachers often implicitly teach. They must, but maybe don't explicitly talk about as much as they could, which is practicing skills.
Oh.
Um, so I consider those kind of the five fundamental musicianship skills that I focus on and try. And it depends on each student, and every student will have certain goals and interests that may mean, well, they're a little bit less interested or need less work in this and a little more work in this. Um, and then in conjunction with that, my experience with adults is that the majority, and there are some exceptions, but the majority of adults really like to they really want to understand music.
Mm-hmm.
They want to play, but they really like, most of them, at least most of my students, really are interested in understanding music. So I have developed a whole curriculum around music theory that I call the Key Mastery course, and it's now an online course. And
Oh, awesome.
so that kind of takes students from the basics of, you know, once you're able to read and play at a kind of of maybe a 1 or 2 year level, and you're ready to really go deeper into understanding scales and intervals and chords and chord progressions. That's what the Key Mastery course is about. It's kind of here's the vocabulary of music, and I also kind of connect it to creativity, because most of my students, maybe because I advertise myself as a teacher who emphasizes creativity, many of my students who come to me are expressing interest in that.
Mm-hmm.
I also have heard from other adult teachers, as an aside here, that I've talked to teachers who teach adults who say that not many of their adult students are interested in being creative or find it intimidating, and
Mm,
certainly I've experienced that as well. But my experience is, even with adults who are intimidated by the idea, that if you just take baby steps with them,
yeah.
almost always they will really get into it. Um, so I don't know where we're at with that. So that's yeah, yeah. So I've got the playing piece, the theory piece, and the creativity piece, and I can certainly tell you more about that.
It's something that the way you're describing this, I'm like, oh man, we do a lot of the same stuff. And so for me, like teaching recreational adults, I mean, one of the foundations is, even from day one, is getting to understand like what's happening in the left hand. Why is it playing this?
Mm,
And just understanding like the foundations of harmony
mhm,
and how things work together. And so I start talking about chords, um, you know, as soon as we have two hands together, I'm talking about the chords, and we're looking at the chord progressions. And I always like to tell or to encourage adults, it's not just about like reading what note you see on the page. If we can really understand why that note is there and what that note means, then
right.
you're going to fast track into being able to play some of those pieces that you mentioned when you first came here, right? So if
Hmm.
if your goal is to play the Beatles, and play things by like your favorite band, your top 40s, then let's understand the theory behind it, because then we can get into lead sheets and we can get into like all this fun stuff. And I love to do improvisation too
Hmm.
in lessons. I'm a big fan of the Forrest Kinney. Oh, what are I can't. Yes, yes, I love the chord play, and then the one about patterns. I can't remember the title, but I can see the
Pattern play. That's his course on that's his method series on improvisation.
yeah. They've loved that, and I think that that's a great way to help them like step their toe into that creative space,
Hmm.
especially if you're doing it alongside them.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because then I just encourage them, there is no wrong note. I'm just going to keep vamping this thing, and you come in with whatever you want, and if you hit something that you don't find, go to the note next door. You might like that one better.
Sure. Right.
I
Right.
see I see in the comments here, I would love to know from those who are with us, let us know, how do you approach theory and creativity in your adult piano lessons? Is that something that you have really thought about? I did see a question here from someone dealing with technique, and this might be too large of a question to answer here, but I thought I'd bring it up. Rachel, nice to see you. Um, she has a technical question. When they're great with hands separate, but it falls apart when playing hands together, any tips? Oh, that's a big question. I like it though.
Um, well, I mean, that of course that happens to every student.
Of course.
Sometimes it means maybe the piece is a bit too difficult for where they're at, or they just need more hand separate practice, or they need to practice slower. Those are usually the three strategies I use.
Yeah. I have another strategy that I've kind of been using every once in a while, since everybody has cell phones, right? If they get disappointed that, because oftentimes it's like, well, it doesn't sound good unless I have both hands together. And I will record using like just the audio function on your phone, record a slow version of whatever hand, and having them like, hey, now take this home. And now you have something that you can play with. So essentially making backing tracks, which is so
Yeah,
easy nowadays with all the technology that we have.
exactly.
So
Yes.
Rachel says, yes, that's exactly what I do. Well, Rachel, you're doing it right. Awesome. Oh, Dawn is tuning in. She has a teaching break, and she says, good morning. I love this topic. Dawn, I'd love to know, are you teaching any adults? That'd be great. Okay, so we have to understand the adult mindset. We need to be open to focusing more on theory and creativity. And then let's talk about repertoire. So you mentioned that it's important for us to be open to a diversity of repertoire. Tell us about what you've discovered in this.
Yeah. Well, So as part of my questionnaire, I have a list of different musical styles that are, kind of piano focused styles, 10 or 12. Classical is only one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And invariably, well, basically everybody, because I think partly because I don't advertise myself as a classical only teacher, so I don't get those kinds of students.
Right.
So that's not to say that there are adults out there that only want to learn classical. I'm sure there are. Um, I'm sure there's plenty of them. But I get plenty of students that have an interest in a diversity of styles, blues, jazz, rock, pop. These days, especially with the younger students, anime music from like anime
Yeah.
movies and shows, and then also video game music is really popular. Um, Again, especially of course with younger students. And some of that music is actually pretty intriguing. It's pretty nice. So, I include all those on my list, and then um, try to find opportunities, as possible when possible to allow them to explore these different styles at whatever level they are at, and don't push them into styles that they're not that interested in. However, I do appreciate, I grew up playing classical. I was classically
Mm-hmm.
trained. I do appreciate that at a certain level, learning some classical music is very useful for just about every keyboard player,
Yeah.
especially going back to Bach, so to speak. So I will encourage, especially as students get, after the first year or two of adult learning, um, I will, even if they have not expressed an interest in classical, I might play something for them and say, "Hey, do you like this piece? You want to try it?" And almost always I can find a classical piece and get them a little bit more into that. And and I'm going to encourage people that are more into classical, let's try a little jazz or blues.
Yeah.
It keeps it interesting for me as well.
I'm so glad that you mentioned how popular anime and video game music is. One of my teens, he is such a talented player. And yeah, he does the classical stuff. He just finished the first movement of the Moonlight Sonata, and it sounds gorgeous. I'm so pleased for him. But he's really into the music from Cowboy Bebop, which
Hmm.
has some like super intense jazz. It's been really fun. And there was another, I'm trying to remember the name of the other composer. It's not coming to me now, but he's done like probably 2 dozen films and the scores from it. And what's fascinating is that the skills that he learned in playing some of those pieces, which were very technically challenging. I mean, he was keeping me on my toes. I had to practice to teach those pieces, but the skills that he learned from that um, then helped him with all kinds of other genres. So, and it
Yeah,
keeps things interesting, doesn't it?
yeah, totally.
Yeah, Pete is saying he's been introduced to some great pieces from video games by his students. And then
Mhm.
he also says hashtag we love Bach. Don's adult students love classical, Broadway, jazz, and blues. So they're all over the genres there. Oh, Stephanie Castor does have a question here. She asked, "Can you recommend some beginning jazz methods?" I have some ideas, maybe.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of like beginner jazz type books for kids, and there's some for adults as well. Kind of depends what you mean by jazz. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, if you mean like a lot of my students want to play when they think of jazz, they think of like playing a beautiful jazzy rendition of Over the Rainbow, for example, or some of those
Okay.
other standards. Um, so obviously by a certain level, there's plenty of repertoire books to choose from. Um, there's like the Simply series that Alfred puts out that has that's more of a, I don't know, low intermediate level,
Yeah.
but very playable. And they have a Simply Standards book that I use with a lot of my students, and then Simply Cole Porter and all those.
Oh, nice.
You know, but those aren't really true beginner books. I mean, you can't. It's hard to do true jazz with just a complete beginner. That's actually one reason I started developing my own method for adults, and actually originally it was because there wasn't one that I could find. I wanted to create a method for adults that actually didn't include classical, that was oriented toward popular styles, in particular blues and jazz. And so I started developing that many years ago. And in the past few years, I've gotten really serious about it. I've taken different kinds of approaches to it. And when the pandemic began and I had to go on to online teaching, I started putting all my course online. And so that's what I use with all my, complete adult beginners. And it does include, it's all, at this point, I actually am planning to add some classical to it. But at this point, it's all, blues and jazz, and then the styles that influenced those, that were the foundation of those styles, which there's tons of American folk music, for example, the African American spirituals, that are just gorgeous songs that so few people know about, that were had a direct musical influence on early blues and ragtime and those styles that fed into jazz. And I really wanted to, not only because it's beautiful music, but I wanted to create, I kind of want to also create a method that was very oriented towards American music, as opposed to the European tradition.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, you're speaking to the musicologist in me. I don't know if you knew, but that's my master's degree.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So I love that you're like creating a journey. Like this is how we got to this point, and bringing in the musics that influenced those specific genres, because when we track back and we look at, how did this come to be, it's quite fascinating. And you're right, we can find some really beautiful repertoire that might, you might not know about because it's older, it's not, gotten a lot of attention. But I love that you brought that into your method. That now, am I correct in thinking the method is called the creative keyboardist?
Yeah, that's what it's currently called. It's the Creative Keyboardist Adult Piano Method.
Oh, wonderful. Where can people find more out more about this method that you're creating?
Well, that's a great question. So I have been looking at the last few years, looking at different ways of, I would love to have other teachers using my method. And at first I was looking at publishing like the traditional route.
Yeah.
I was advised against that approach in a conversation I actually had with Forrest Kinney a couple of years before he passed away.
Yeah.
He was super helpful and supportive, and in his own experience, he said, you don't work with traditional publishers if you can avoid it. Self-publish.
Yeah.
So then I started thinking about self-publishing books. But then when the pandemic began, I started putting everything online as an online course for my virtual students to use, because everybody's a virtual student.
Right.
I started thinking about orienting this as an online course. So most online courses are self-education courses where you go on and, there's all these piano self-learning websites for piano where you can go on. You don't have a teacher, you don't get feedback.
Right.
And the app or the website kind of guides you through. And, I'm sure people can learn to some extent that way. But we know that having a teacher is, if you really want to get anywhere and get good, you need a teacher. So my course was made and created for me and for any teacher to use with adult students. So it's not a self-education course, but it is online. So it's something that you could use with virtual students. But I am going to, once I start teaching live and in person again, I'm going to continue using it, maybe with an iPad on the piano, or, you can print out the music. So, and so like the theory aspect of that, which is called the Key Mastery course, which is kind of an adjunct course to the Creative Keyboardist course, covers that music theory aspect. And then I'm developing an improvisation course and a composition course and a series of arranging courses. So
Ooh.
I'm going to have all these materials for teachers of adults to use, and I already do to some extent.
Oh, that's fantastic. And in just a second here, we'll tell you where you can find more of these things. I see Rose. Rose has a beautiful comment here. She said that Forrest Kinney, he came to her local chapter several times, and he was pure joy to hear him share his approach to the four arts of music. I'm so glad that you had the opportunity to see him speak. He was a really, he had a huge influence in how we view being creative at the piano. And I love to see that his legacy will continue. And I've seen that they are still updating things, and it's fabulous. If you haven't seen those books, they're really great. So before we get to where people can find you, we're going to do a rapid, what I call like a rapid recap here of the points that we've touched on for those of you who might have joined us a little bit later in the broadcast. What we've been looking at here is the business of teaching recreational adults, because we know there's so many adults out there that are looking for lessons. And if you've thought about becoming a recreational adult teacher, Doug has 3 things that he wants you to keep in mind. So Doug, would you kind of recap those? I'll bring them up on the screen. So tell us what did we need to know about understanding the adult mindset?
Well, I guess the main thing we talked about was that adults are self-directed,
Mm-hmm.
and so you want to orient your lessons around their goals and musical interests, in conjunction with what you know as a teacher that will be important for them to learn in order to achieve their goals. And then also, of course, the adults are very busy, and so you as a teacher need to be more flexible and accommodating.
Yeah, and to set and have those good conversations at the beginning so that you can set expectations on both sides, and like you said, to be flexible with it. I love that. And then we want to focus more with our adults if we want to have like a really successful relationship with them, is to focus more on theory and creativity, which not a lot of people might have thought of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful for the work that Forrest Kinney did in like kind of making inroads among the music teaching profession and getting more and more teachers interested in helping students to be creative and there's so much to learn actually as a musician when you are creative. I mean, there's things you can only learn and skills you can only develop that are important to being a player too, that you will develop better when you're creative.
Yeah, and so if we can lean into these things, I think we can become much more successful at being a good teacher for
Hmm.
adult students,
Hmm.
and we'll keep them coming back, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, this is good. And then, of course, with adults, we need to be open to a diversity of repertoire. And you mentioned, what were there, 12 different types you said?
I
10 or
don't
12?
remember. I have a list of 10 or 12 different, musical styles that are, the main piano related styles and popular styles. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? We've got a question here before we get to where you can find this stuff. Cheryl Lee says, the few adults that I've taught in the past did not practice much and then quit. Any tips to motivate them to practice? Do you want to speak to that, Doug?
Yeah. Well, I think everything that we've talked about is could be of could be helpful.
Yeah.
Um, I think one thing about adults that I've actually kind of noticed is that so before I started developing my own method, I used some of the adult methods like Alfred and Faber,
Right.
and those are both pretty good methods. And I feel like, especially complete beginners, adults really want to feel this sense of progression that
Yes, they do.
they don't get that sense if it's all kind of vague. Like, am I getting better? Am I really learning? Then it's less motivating. So
Mhm.
that's why I do find that some kind of method. What I like, for example, about the Faber method is that there's 16 units, and it's like you kind of feel at the end of each unit that you've graduated onto something a little bit harder, and
Yeah.
that you're making progress.
Yeah, I am
So
a big fan of the Fired Up series by Jennifer Eklund. I found that that's really a great series for adults as well, because it has, it's like little units inside of it. So they're not only are they learning to like play a really cool sounding piece, and it's a short piece. They're
Yeah.
like micro win pieces. They're never over a page long, so that if they're limited on practice time, um, because the piece is short, it's really pattern based. It gives them those wins so that they can feel like they're getting better, because they are.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, that's really fun. You had one other thing I wanted to mention here. You have a book available on Kindle over on Amazon, the 17 Success Strategies for Adult Piano Students. So if you guys want to learn more about what Doug has to say about adult piano students, that would be a great resource to check out.
Of course, it's really just written for students and for like kind of students who are new to learning piano. So I don't
Okay,
know how much of
excellent.
that would be useful for teachers, but maybe a little bit.
Oh, maybe useful. Well, if we can understand what they need to do, I mean, they could teach some of those strategies, or even better, like suggest. Would you suggest that a teacher, tell them, "Hey, I got you this book," or maybe buy that book for them, or suggest that they purchase it?
No, not so much. It's really oriented towards adults who don't have a teacher yet.
Okay, excellent. Okay, good to know. But I bet there's some interesting things in there for us teachers. I see that our video is lagging just a little bit. I think it'll come back in just a second. Yeah, and I agree. Lisa says adults look for a quick accomplishment win. Agreed.
Mhm.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
want to have that quick win. Well, this has been really fantastic, Doug. I really appreciate you joining us here today. If people want to follow you, they can find out more about you at portlandpianolab.com. Do I have that correct?
That's right.
Awesome. And of course, we have the Savvy Sarah bot set up. So if you want to put the word adults below, she's going to send you in Messenger. She'll send you a recap of the things that we've gone over today. And she'll also send you a link to Doug's website so that you can check out his resources. He has some really fantastic blog posts. And I've always really enjoyed reading what you put out there, because you're very thoughtful in the way that you present your ideas.
Thank you. And if I could just make a little pitch for a
Absolutely.
couple things. One of which is I'm in the process of trying to learn more about the landscape of recreational music making, in particular the teaching of adults. And
Excellent.
I'm conducting a series of interviews with teachers who do teach adults. Um, and I would love to find a few new people to speak with. The interview takes about 20, 30 minutes. It's just between us. Um, so if anybody's interested in that, you can reach me through my website. You can contact me directly at Doug, Doug, at portlandpianolab.com. That's one
Wonderful.
thing. Um, Another thing is if you have any interest, because I'm getting very close to the point where I want to get other teachers probably trying out my online course with their adult learners, especially their beginner adults. If you have any interest in doing that, feel free to email me and we can talk about that.
Fabulous. I'm really excited to hear that your method is going to be pretty soon here brought out to other teachers, because I think that there are many teachers who are looking for something that you've created, and it's here. So congratulations on the upcoming launch for that.
Thank you, sir.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I see Janet says, thanks, Doug and Sarah, and Katya saying thank you. Thanks so much for being here. If you've enjoyed today's broadcast, don't forget to give us some hearts and some thumbs up, and to let your teacher friends know about this resource, because we had a great conversation here today. So invite your friends to join us, or if you have a piano group that you think would benefit from this conversation, make sure that you send that over there to that group. That would be fabulous. Doug, hang on here, so don't hang up yet, but I will. So Doug, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it, and I will. We hopefully we'll get to do something again in the future here. So as we wrap this up, so we'll say goodbye to Doug. Thank you, Doug. Hang on here. I'll be with you in a second.
All right. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you all. You guys are fabulous. And I will look forward to seeing you next week, where we will be talking about business mindset and marketing and all the good things that we love to talk about. You can catch us next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern. In the meantime, stay savvy and stay you, because there is no other teacher out in the world that is just like you, and you're pretty dang awesome. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.